welcome to another episode of Pound for Pound Boxing Report, episode 464. I am your host, Michael. Joining me this evening is Gail from nyfight.com, Daniel from 4Boxing News, and Inscribe. I hope to have him on shortly. But for the time being, what's going on, Gail?
Hey, we all slaved over a long weekend of boxing, and we will wrap it up here tonight. If you were
Listen,
actually doing something fun, you were out this weekend, you didn't get up at the crack of dawn this morning, and we got you covered. We got you
li-
covered.
listen, it was basically a 3-day weekend, and I was here for not all of it, but most of it, including basically pulling an all-nighter and getting that card from Japan earlier this morning for 3kingsboxing.com. I see Daniel's getting ready to join us. Here he is, Daniel from 4Boxing News and the Inscriber. What's going on, sir? I don't know if you can hear us or not, but anyway, for those who are new to Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report live YouTube show, podcast, discussing all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, it will get discussed. If you wish to email us, you can do so. P4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. You can check us out all over social media on Twitter, because I refuse to call it X. You can check it out there at P4P Boxing Report. On also got Pound for Pound Boxing Report page on Facebook, as well as IG. If you wish to donate, let donation be the best nation. Cash me and PayPal donations if you wish to do so, preferably PayPal, because Cash Me has had some issues. They've changed their policies where you cannot donate in the way that you could, let's just say 4 or 6 months ago. It's a little bit tougher to donate on Cash Me right now. So if you wish to donate please, I would prefer PayPal. $1, $2, $5, $10, it wouldn't matter to me. It will help overall production behind the scenes. Let's get things going. This evening is going to be mainly a recap show, recap and previews, no news, because there was so much boxing, as Gail alluded to, particularly on Saturday. Again, just mainly straight recaps and preview focusing on the return of Tank Davis in Brooklyn this coming Saturday. I'll start it. Uh, I usually start ladies first with Gail, but as I mentioned, there was a fight card in Japan, Tokyo to be specific, that took place earlier this morning. For those who got up and saw it, you watched it on ESPN Plus. Um, prop, Probably watching on ESPN Plus, excuse me. And that was Junto Nakatani defending the WBC belt at 118 pounds, fighting David Cuellar of Mexico. The interesting thing is, in the pre-fight, that Nakatani, who's tall for a 118-pounder, 5'8", 5'9" ish in that area, was actually fighting someone who was just as tall as he is. But there was no sweat. He had little problems with this one. Um, Box for the most part for the first 2 rounds. He began to notice that Cuellar was starting to telegraph his punches, and once that he found that out, um, it was a wrap. Um, Body punches in the third round produced the first knockdown. Roughly 25 to 30 seconds to go in round three. He's quickly finished things off with a fusillade of punches to end matters. The interesting thing here is that in the post fight, right? Nakatani was joined in the ring by IBF, 118-pound champion. I'm gonna try to pronounce his name right. Excuse me, y'all, if I butcher it. Um, Ryusuke Nishida, uh, and the way that both fighters were talking, it seems like Nakatani's next bout will be a unification fight against his countryman Nishida. Nakatani, going back to when he won the belt, WBC belt 18, WBC bantamweight belt, set a goal of his before what we all think is an eventual move up to 122 to challenge. In a way, he wanted to become a unified champion at 118 pounds first. It looks like he's going to get that. I'm guessing that's going to happen at some point this summer in Japan or maybe in the United States, depending on how things go and um, connection with Inui on that. No, let me take that back. Two Japanese fighters, that's going to happen in Japan. So, yeah, that's what took place this morning. Junto Nakatani, third round knockout of David Cuellar. And after that fight, it seems like he's going to fight countryman and IBF champion Nishida in a unification showdown. Let's go from there back to Saturday, which was a loaded card. Gail, I don't know if it was the greatest fight card of all time, as it was being hyped up to be. Uh, but it was a good one of the better fight cards that we've seen in a while, right? Headline, of course, by the rematch between Beterbiev and Bivol. They fought last November. Uh, Beterbiev won by close decision. This time, it was Bivol who turned the tables. A lot of people in the post-fight, Gail, felt that Beterbiev did enough to win. I, for one, had it Bivol by 2 points on my card, right? In their first fight, there are certain moments where you have to rise to the occasion. That was the championship rounds. It was Beterbiev who did it, and Bivol, I don't know, it's fatigue or what, but he couldn't get the shots off. After the middle rounds, where Beterbiev came on strong, Gail, you could see Bivol summon his resources and was like, I'm not going to let this happen again. I'm putting my foot down. I'm determined. I work hard. I'm putting everything in this. And that's what he did. And to me, it was those championship rounds specific, particularly rounds 8 through the finish, that Bivol really stepped up to the plate. He seized the evening. That's where he won the fight to me.
Sounds like clapback Thursday over there at your end with all that clapping going on, Michael. But Bivol had never lost until his last fight with Beterbiev. And it lit a fire under him because he felt the sting of a loss for the first time as a pro and a veteran pro. And he said it in several interviews that he discovered he hates to lose and how much he hates to lose. And you could absolutely see that as the driving motivation for him to get revenge in this fight. That's what it takes for any fighter to win. It's got to start in the heart and the mind first. And Bivol let that push him. He clearly watched back, saw where his flaws were, assessed them honestly, and addressed them successfully. He also mentioned he had watched the fight back, at least in one interview I heard, 8 or 9 times. I'm not surprised. I know him fairly well. He's incredibly diligent. His trainer, who not a lot of people know, Gennady Mashianov, who's been with him all the way as a pro, he does not speak English. He's very much recedes to the background, but he is a technician as well as Bivol. And he did what he needed to do. I thought he clearly won the fight. Ironically, it was by the exact same scores Saturday on the 3 cards that Beterbiev won by in the first fight, except reversed, except for that draw. He had far better control of the ring. It was the ring generalship, his willingness to get in there, and being sure not to let off the gas, as you said, in those championship rounds. Now, if we consider the championship rounds 10 through 12, Beterbiev actually won the 12th round, but it was just a little too late. A little too little and a little too late. Would have turned that fight into a draw on the other 2 cards. I am not one to consider CompuBox stats, the way to determine the outcome of a fight, but I do think they're instructive and telling. It's worth noting that Bivol landed 170 of his 547 punches thrown. That's a 31% connect rate against 121 of 688 punches attempted for Beterbiev, and that's only 17%, just a little more than half of what Bivol was able to land. And what stymied and held Bivol back in the first fight is his lack of using his jab. Statistically, Bivol is the best jab in boxing. He at the highest work rate and the highest connect rate. That didn't happen in the first fight. It happened this time. He landed 7 jabs per round. For a light heavyweight, that's a lot. And those 170 punches he landed were the most punches ever landed by a Beterbiev opponent, ever. Now, admittedly, very few fighters have gone with Beterbiev into those championship rounds, much less to the final bell, and that's only happened against Bivol. But it shows that Bivol took command of the fight this time. He pushed forward. He was frequently the fighter going forward, much more so than before. And I do think that he studied the first fight and looked at himself and thought, okay, yeah, he cracked me a few times, but, I held up to the story legendary power okay. And he took a pretty hard shot at the end of, I believe it was the 10th round. He definitely got buzzed. But he didn't wobble. He stayed on his feet. He did not present, any kind of wounded animal, to which Beterbiev would have swarmed him, I'm sure. So, wonderful performance. Honestly, precisely the performance I expected in the first fight. We got it in the second fight, and surely we're going to see a third fight.
Great mixture of high quality boxing from the skills department, but uh, toughness, grit, determination. They boxed when they needed to box, Daniel. They fought, they sat down, and went to war when they had to as well. Were you surprised how, look, how can I put this? To Gail's point, whenever Bivol got cracked, he fought right back. Beterbiev has this noted reputation of being a tremendous puncher. Were you surprised at the resistance and overall toughness from Bivol? And do you think there were moments in this fight where I think he got more of Berterbiev's respect than he did in that first fight?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because one of the things that's happened between that fight is the passage of time. And Beterbiev, he may still be hitting as hard, but he was just a little bit slower this time around. And even during the first fight, the main advantage that Bivol had, in my eyes, was he was going to be the faster fighter. But he wasn't able to show it in the first fight a lot because Beterbiev actually had pretty good stamina. Not as much this time. He didn't become an old man overnight, but you can tell that Father Time is slowly catching up to him. You couple that with the fact that we've already tasted Beterbiev's power in the first fight. He knows what he can handle. And even at the point where he got buzzed, he got buzzed pretty good in the 10th round, but he was able to take those punches better, and he was able to counter and not let Beterbiev get more of a sustained attack as the middle rounds and late rounds went on. And that helped Bivol establish his attack, showed that he had the faster hands, and they were quicker around the guard of Beterbiev more than they were on the other end this time around. And you could tell that Beterbiev felt, particularly after that 10th round, where he knew he buzzed him but wasn't able to knock him down, that Bivol came more prepared than he was in the first fight, because he saw after the scorecards were announced, he didn't try to protest, he didn't try to say he was robbed. He understood, because the first fight was close too. And there are a good amount of people that felt that Bivol won the first fight. So in this case, when you look at how Bivol won the fight, how he established his counters, particularly his head counters late into the fight, you could tell that, yeah, he won that fight. It was close, but he won that fight.
Okay, leading candidate, in my opinion, for early leading candidate for fight of the year. At 175, I hadn't seen a fight that good in a minute, right? Um, the question is, what's next? A lot of people, there were three options on the table, and I want both of you included in this question. I'll start with you, Gail. There's simply three options on the table for Bivol. A third fight with Beterbiev, um, Bivol fighting David Benavidez, right, who's mandatory contender. And there's always the prospect of Canelo out there, and I'm hearing in these boxing streets that Canelo really wants a rematch with Bivol at 175, right? If you were Bivol, if you were a member of his team, where would you go, Gail?
Well, he will not go to Canelo in 2025. He's locked up for the rest of the year. So that's not on the table right now. I do think in the future, as perhaps one of his exit fights in 2026, that'll be an option. But I think it will all depend on whether he still has those belts in his hands in 2026. And we don't know that yet. Anything can happen. Is the rematch next? From a money standpoint, that would be the best decision. However, if you noted the post-fight interview, Bivol mentioned that he needs some time to rest up from what sound like a lot of nagging injuries. I understand he's had some back issues. He's had some other, nagging problems. And listen, every fighter has them, especially if they're active at a high level like this. And remember,
Yeah, he basically said he had to have some cortisone shots
he has a
to
lot of
even get through camp.
anti-inflammatories, right? So yeah, that's exactly what's going on. And he'll need to have some rest time. And he's earned it. This fight on Saturday was only 4 months after their original fight. So he's earned a break. Is that going to be a long break? Is that going to be a 2025 break? It might be. And it's really going to depend on what his motivation is. He wants more accomplishments. He's eyeing perhaps a move up to cruiserweight for another title in another division. That's probably a bit down the road. He'll need to conclude his business at light heavyweight, I think. And he is a very natural light heavyweight. He does not struggle to make weight. He does not have to trim down almost at all. He walks around pretty close to this weight. I've seen him eat breakfast the day of a weigh-in. So, there you go. And he was almost a pound under on the scale. So it's going to depend on whether his priority right now is legacy, money. Does he feel any obligation to the Saudi General Entertainment Authority to take on that trilogy fight? I'm sure that's what Turki al-Sheikh would prefer to see, is the third fight. It's amazing, a huge draw for him. No doubt the third fight will be just as good as the first two and just as big a draw for the audience. But I don't think we need to know the answer right away. And I don't think either of the fighters really know the answer right away. Bivol might want to enjoy those little belts for a while. He was pretty darn happy to hoist all of those. And some of the photos of him after the fight holding them all.
I've never seen the cat smile, but yet he was teasing showing all 32 teeth almost after
Yeah,
the fight.
right. And there's a shot that photographer Mark Robinson, who works for Matchroom Boxing, who's a phenomenal fight photographer, got of Bivol backstage afterward, and there's one where he looks like he's letting out a yell. I have been around him, and Bivol is one of the calmest, lowest key personalities in boxing. I mean, he's a very thoughtful, cerebral kind of guy. He's very polite. That's absolutely who he is, except that there's that smoldering fire deep down. That's what gave him the win on Saturday. But yeah, to see him yelling like that, just flat out amazing. I'm not sure he wants to give those up in a trilogy fight all that quickly. What will also come into play is any sanctioning body shenanigans, and we all know how that goes.
Future Dmitry Bivol, Daniel, your thoughts?
Well, the motivation for a trilogy with Beterbiev, I don't think it would involve the blood money mark. I think it's the mere fact that it's national pride. They're 1-1, and they probably want to see, okay, who is going to be the better fighter representing Russia. That's the motivation of it. And but I could see him being the person, I could see Bivol being the person that could handle his mandatories first, because when it comes to Benavidez, what is left for him to do? Like, he already fought probably the one guy that you could say, oh, that might have been a challenge, and he took care of him fairly well in Morale. If Benavidez is not gonna get Canelo, which it clearly looks like that's going to be the case, then why not put your hat out there, get yourself that challenge, because you know that trilogy fight Beterbiev will be there. It could be there in the end of the year, or it could also be in the beginning of 2026. That trilogy fight will always be there. This fight Benavidez may not always be there. So I could see that situation where he'll handle his mandatory, and at the same time, like I said, it puts Canelo in a position where, should Bivol lose to Benavidez, he really doesn't have much of a choice. He won't be able to avoid him much longer. So that's probably the angle where I could see him going, because luckily the trilogy's still there, and Beterbiev luckily has not become an old man overnight still.
Barely. I have to add, both of these fighters are presumed to be fully Russian fighters, but let's point out, Beterbiev is a Chechen Muslim who's a Canadian citizen. He might come from
That's right.
He might have come from a country controlled by Russia, but he feels he's fully Canadian, by the way.
Yeah.
And like I say, a Chechen Muslim minority. So there's that. Bivol is half Korean. His mother's Korean. His father's Moldovan. Yes, he speaks Russian, but a lot of Ukrainians speak Russian, and they they are not Russian. So, I would not say that those two are the embodiment of Russian fighters, although who wouldn't want to claim either one as a representative of their country? As far as Benavidez, I'd like to see him and Callum Smith mix it up, and we'll talk about that fight, I'm sure, in a few minutes. But I think Callum Smith has earned that opportunity, and they might have quite the banger. I wouldn't hate that. I
Indeed.
wouldn't be mad at that.
Indeed, I forgot to put that in the docket. Someone put that in the private chat, so I won't forget. As we go down the rest of this card, I'm going to split this up. Going back to you, Daniel. Return to Shakur Stevenson following hand surgery, right? He was supposed to fight Kid Austin. Kid Austin had to withdraw because it's still an issue. What caused him to withdraw? I know there was a flu bug going. There was a flu bug going around in Saudi Arabia, which affected apparently multiple fighters. Right. Anyway, he fought late replacement Josh Patty from England, and Shakur dominated, had his way. Um, for the most part, body shots were the key in the right ninth round stoppage, but afterwards, Daniel Shakur received a lot of flack from folks on social media and whatnot, and even from folks doing commentary. I know during the British feed, Barry McGuigan was like, "Yeah, he's good, but don't tell me that he's on the level of Tank." I heard a lot of those similar assessments from pundits and fans and whatnot. Is it a case here that no matter what Shakur did, he just couldn't win?
Yes, because we have to remember, one, you had this situation was a late replacement, and that seemed to be unfortunately a theme uh, for much of this card, because he was supposed to actually fight Flo Schofield, but we talked about it last week. Schofield, while being brash, young, and confident, we didn't think on a technical level he was going to be anywhere near of a challenge for Shakur. This is the same case. And as good as Shakur was, and he was landing great combination. It wasn't a situation where in his previous fights where it looked like he was coasting. He put a bit more effort. You could tell he wanted the knockout. He just wasn't able to get it. But unfortunately, the die has been cast a bit for Shakur as far as his reputation. And while on a technical level, I still believe he far, far surpasses Tank right now in that aspect. Tank is an exciting fighter. Tank has the power that can bail him out. But he also has the ability to not really put himself in a position where he doesn't have to rely on that power to bail him out. He always puts himself into that spot. I'll always mention this. He was losing to Rowley before that knockout. And in a
Right.
situation,
Yeah.
yeah, in a situation with a fight with Shakur, it has to be a certain situation like that. But Tank has built a reputation. Shakur has to do a lot in order to undo that part of his reputation, even as sound of a technical fighter as he is.
Right. Um, Unpopular opinion. I still think Shakur at 100% beats Tank. Um, I know there's issues with Shakur in his hands, right? I mentioned how he's coming off of hand surgery for this fight, and afterwards he said he would seek advice from some folks, including Ward, Mayweather, who also had hand issues throughout their careers in terms of how to deal with what they did to cope uh, with issues of for lack of a word, semi brittle hands, right? But on balance, when it comes to boxing skills, Shakur is right when he says that Tank is not on his level when it comes to outright pure boxing. Yes, I know Tank is explosive. Yes, I know he has a big punch. Yes, I know he's probably the physically stronger and the naturally bigger guy, but skill pays the bills. Um, Tank, of course, is coming up has a fight coming up with Lamont Roach on March the 1st. But the bottom line is those two cats need to fight. There's really no excuses at this point. I know that um, Tank doesn't want to work with Turkey a la Sheik. I get that. But there are ways to work around that. If the fans want to see the fight, if pundits want to see the fight, why is Tank being so adamant in terms of, you know, acting like he's above it all when it comes to a fight with Shakur, saying he's basically he hadn't done enough to earn the fight? Based on what, sir? He claims that Shakur hasn't beat a top shelf opponent. Neither have you, sir. So for me, yeah, Shakur Tank, that fight needs to happen in 2025. Full stop. Let's move on to some other fights, Gail. And Joseph Parker, right? Was supposed to fight Daniel Dubois. Daniel Dubois, again, Schofield, Kid Austin, Floyd Schofield, came down ill, right? Super late substitute Mark Bakole. When I first heard that Bakole was going to be the substitute opponent, I was like, "Uh-oh, I don't know about this." If I was Team Parker, why put someone in? Why put him in there with Bakole until Gail? You found all the drama in terms of how Bakole had to get there and whatnot, blah blah blah, right? Um, the fact that he had to, the travel issues, the fact that he was 315. And then when you saw him in the ring, yeah, he was super big. And to Parker's credit, he hit and hurt him right hand in round two, had him wobbly equilibrium shot, and then just like that, Parker scores one of the in on balance, kind of more the impressive wins of his career. The train keeps rolling for Joseph Parker, Gale.
Boy, it sure does. We had two giant killer performances on this card. Parker and Agit Kayabel, both of them. They've been on several Saudi cards, both fighters, both taken on every heavyweight opponent put in front of them, and been the betting underdog and the spiritual underdog in every single fight against the big punchers. And every single time, both of them have won. It's time to start taking the 2025 version of Joseph Parker a lot more seriously. As he said after the win, what do I need to do to get a title fight? That was it. That right there was it. He has dethroned Zhili Zhang. He has dethroned, defanged Deontay Wilder, admittedly perhaps a bit of a faded version. And he's now the guy standing there with the ability to land that one punch. He's also shown in the fight against Zhang that he can get off the deck if necessary to do it. That is a powerful tool in the toolkit. Parker landed the absolute perfect roundhouse right at that point of the temple. When any fighter hits it, you know, it's the headshot version of that left hook to the liver. It paralyzes you, it messes you up. You may be mentally there, seeing it happen in slow motion. There's not a damn thing you can do about it. Bakole tried to get up, beat the count early. He struggled. He did get to his feet. He was wobbling all over the damn place. His back to the referee. He was holding onto the ropes. He was done. He was cooked. You know, he just didn't have the prep time. And let's face it, that travel it was a long ass day the day before. He got to Saudi Arabia at 2 a.m. local time. He fought approximately 24 hours later on the card. You know, those cards run very late into the night, early morning in Saudi Arabia. So that was a long ass day. And I just hope to God when he got on Ethiopian Airlines, which is one of the few places that flies out of the Congo towards the Middle East from Brazzaville, where he was visiting family, I hope to God they had a first class size seat for him, because otherwise I can't even imagine. And he had to change planes twice to get there. He had to fly through Abu Dhabi. I'm checking all the flight schedules because I was just so damn curious how he was going to get there. So that was 12 hours of travel. He gets there, he's dead tired, gets on an unofficial scale at 315, but he was fully clothed. So admittedly, we knew he was going to be 5 to 10 pounds under. So the official weight was actually 310. That's still 10 pounds heavier than he's ever been in his career. And it was simply the very best prepared version of Joseph Parker against the least prepared version of Martin Bakole. That's a fight I wouldn't mind seeing again if Parker dares do it with a better prepared, ready to rumble version of Martin Bakole. Any sane fighter would say, oh, hell no, I beat him once. I don't need to go there again. Joseph Parker is a complete badass and would probably say yes, especially if there's Saudi money behind it. Good for both of them. Bakole, props to him. I hope he was well compensated. And for Pete's sake, I hope someone sent him home on a private jet from Saudi Arabia. I mean, come on. They kept the fight going. It was wildly entertaining for as long as it lasted. Who doesn't love seeing a heavyweight knockout? And damn, if there was ever any verification of the old cliche, the bigger they are, the harder they fall, that was it.
Apparently, Bakole was given an offer. He couldn't refuse. That's why he took it on such short notice. Is my understanding that despite what happened, um, it will not affect his what was supposed to be a fight with Efe Igjagba in May. For me, I want to see Parker fight Dubois. I mean, doggone it, he's earned it. I mean, how many of these fights he has to fight? How many of these guys does he have to go through? I know Usyk, who was ringside, was asked what does he want next, and he said he wants Dubois, and it seems like we may see a rematch between Dubois and Usyk later on this year. But for me, just on general principle, Gail, uh, Parker has said that he wants a title fight next. He's earned it. He deserves it.
100%. And it's not realistic to think that he's next in line for Usyk, although I do not know what the rotation of mandatory challengers is for Usyk. But they already had made the Dubois fight. And let's just pause for a second to address the ridiculous, once again, the ridiculous conspiracy theories that just flourish on boxing Twitter about everything. There is definitely a virus circling the globe that is something with the symptoms right between the most vicious mix between COVID and the flu. It also is the truth that it takes your body and your microbiome time to readjust to a new environment, new water system, food. I mean, neither of these guys, Schofield or Dubois, arrived in Saudi Arabia very much before the fight. Parker had been there training for a month early. He gets it. He moves there. He gets completely settled in, comfortable, and physically adjusted. I have no doubt they both caught the same thing. I hear it hit quite a few other people over there behind the scenes. It just happens. And I cannot believe either of those guys, plus their entire camps, would travel all that way there only to back out at the last minute. Dubois especially. Dubois had showed up and participated in the media workout on Wednesday. He must have either gutted his way through or wasn't quite feeling ill by then. And then only after he goes through all that, he has to withdraw. That was not calculated. Absolutely not. That's a fight that can certainly be reconfigured, as soon as Parker feels ready. Parker didn't have a mark on him. I'm sure he and Andy Lee will be ready to go after a bit of a rest. He is real eager to see his family, his wife and his 4 daughters at home in New Zealand. So give him a little time off to, get reacquainted with his family after having trained away from them for months. But certainly it paid off. So, Dad, you better bring some nice things home for your girls and your wife when you go back to New Zealand.
Indeed, indeed. So fair play. Well, fair play when it comes to Joseph Parker. Again, he is in his bag right now. He is on a serious roll, and um, I don't know if I'm a heavyweight right now. Um, Even an Usyk, the way he's fighting and his mindset and his focus right now, he is a dangerous guy for anyone in that division. Speaking of fighters who were supposedly sick, Vergil Ortiz fighting Israil Madrimov, right? Madrimov, we just remember giving Bud Crawford a competitive scrap last year in August, right? I thought he was going to give Ortiz a similar tough battle, but after third, fourth round, in my opinion, um, the snap for Madrimov was gone, and you could see him breathing heavily um, throughout the second half of that contest. Anyway, throughout the second half of that contest, excuse me, uh, Ortiz slowly but surely began to gain control. You got to love Roger Ortiz Jr. His body attack, one of the best body punchers in the sport. Just some mean left hooks to the ribs that he was landing on Madrimov. It's now come out that Madrimov, doing post-fight interviews, saying that he had been sick for 2 weeks leading up to this bout. In your mind, given what Gail just talked about in terms of a virus going on basically all over, does is there an asterisk over this win from Vergil Ortiz over Madrimov?
No, because it wasn't a situation where Madrimov legitimately said before the fight, "Hey, I'm not feeling really 100%." It only came out afterward, and sometimes what comes out afterward sounds like an excuse. Because looking at this fight, I could tell Madrimov's plan was use the movement, make himself more of a moving target for Vergil, and try to see if that stamina that Vergil has, because we've seen it before at 147, where he sometimes tended to fade out as the fight went on, if that follows him to 154. But it looks like that wasn't the case. Around the fourth round, Vergil started picking up his rhythm, actually, and landing the shots. Now, it's true. Madrimov at that point stopped moving as much. He became more of a stationary target. But at the same time, he was still being sound defensively, and he was still landing his own shots against Vergil. And it didn't look like Vergil was starting to tire out as the fight went in, not until the very, very end of the fight. And that showed to me that maybe we should have seen Vergil 154 maybe a year or two before they did. I understood the reasons why staying at 147 made sense, but we probably would have gotten a much more complete Vergil Ortiz if he would have made the jump much earlier. But he shouldn't have an asterisk in this situation, because if it got bad enough where people like Schofield and Dubois had to drop out, but Madrimov didn't, unless they could literally find no other person at 154 that they could put in as a late replacement at that stage, you can't just come out afterwards and just said, okay, yeah, I've been sick, because other fighters took it out too, and you toughed it out. If anything, you should have been held, you should be commended more a little bit for toughing out something like this, rather than try to use it as an excuse.
Where does Ortiz goes from here, Daniel?
Well, he's at 154, and the division is pretty open. So unless Bud is firmly gonna stay at 168 for the Canelo fight and not go down afterwards, I would say target. Put that in the target area. Even though you likely will not win if you're Vergil, you've been gunning for Bud Crawford for years. Since 147, you've been gunning for him. Even knowing full well at that point you were not going to win. Why not go after that area? And there's plenty of fighters you can actually get in that area. You can actually step in and make it really, really good fight out of it. I probably would like to see him more against Fundora more than anything else, because that's a fight between a guy who can throw good to the body versus somebody who has the pace to do it to the body. That would be a fight I would like to target if I'm Vergil, just to show that if at 154 is the weight for him.
At 160, Gail, the division is pretty meh right now. But a world champion in that division is WBC belt holder Carlos Adames. He's been out the ring for a while. Fought Hamzah Sheeraz, who has a lot of high hopes in England, and I kind of felt that Sheeraz had a decent scrap, but sometimes just experience matters over talent, and that's what you saw here. Yes, Shiraz got off to a good start, but you can see over time that Adames was thinking. He was using his boxing brain and his skill and his IQ, and he was figuring things out. Now I know Shiraz supposedly will suffer an injury to his hands, but this is the pros. You deal with that. You overcome and you adjust and adapt. And the immaturity of the young lad came into play here as far as I'm concerned. While the experience of Adamas really proved to be the difference. He wanted it more. While Shiraz at a certain level, I think kind of checked out mentally as soon as his hand began to hurt.
I think we also find frequently with talented fighters from the United Kingdom who absolutely pass the eye test, who perform brilliantly against domestic talent, get to this level and find out what it takes to truly be a champion. And they honestly haven't been tested in quite the right way. I think even though Shiraz had 20 fights and 17 knockouts, um, he was not quite ready for Adames. Um, Now, Adames has only fought once each of the last 3 years, and he didn't take on any world beaters either. But he has been tested by far more than Adames has in some rough fights. And sometimes when you're fighting domestic opponents, underrated opponents, it's like these mystery Mexican opponents who frequently win upsets. They teach you a lot. Adames has faced a ton of guys like that. Shiraz, no, not so much because he was, being carefully brought along, and it really did not benefit him in the long run. Because you're right, Adames had far too much experience that he could rely on, too much muscle memory, that's been forged over the years. And he was just too hard for Sheeraz to figure out. Hand injury, no hand injury. Sheeraz just hasn't faced the kind of challengers who could have taught him something, who could have made him earn some hard lessons so that he would have known what to do with Adames when he got in front of him, or provided the confidence building exercises he needed to successfully go in and attack Adames, and he just couldn't do it. Again, disclaimer, CompuBox should not be the sort of statistics that tell you who wins and loses a fight, but those numbers are instructive. Adames had a 90 to 48 advantage in power punches landed. But damn it, that effort, plus what we clearly all saw in the ring, wasn't enough to get a second scorecard in his favor, even though the one scorecard he did get was a crazy making 118 to 110 when you had another card for Sheeraz at 115 to 114 and one that was even. So once again, the judging is a head scratcher. Honestly, a draw isn't the worst outcome we could have had either way, because you could see somebody, leaning on the scales a little bit to get the outcome they were looking for. And it was no secret how much Turkey al-Sheikh and the Saudi General Entertainment Authority wanted Sheeraz to win.
What do you make about that moment where he basically looked at the scorecards and then was yelling at Sheeraz, you're 2 points behind, blah, 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 2 rounds behind, blah, blah, blah. Not a good look.
Not a good look. I think in the end, no harm was really done. I seriously do not think that affected the outcome of the fight. But Turkey he is first and foremost a fan. He's a guy who has only really gotten involved at this level of boxing in the last barely year and a half, and that's being generous. He still doesn't understand that there are roles to play as a promoter that do not permit you to be a fan at the same time. Whether or not we also think he should be a part owner of the broadcast, company that televises streams these fights, which he is, or be the full 100% owner of the magazine of record all at the same damn time. That's a discussion for another day, and it's, to me, a discussion that's troubling, because we've seen what a monopoly has done to UFC, and it hasn't in the long run benefited the fighters. So, and they also had a darn horrible card Saturday night, for those of you who watched that after a long day of boxing. So yeah, Turkey needs to understand that's to mix metaphors in a big damn way. That's not kosher in boxing, okay? So you need to knock that shit off. But it wouldn't have affected the outcome of the fight. Both guys, for Adames, I think there was just enough ring rust to hold him back from a more definitive demonstration that he needed to win. And it was one of those things where he really needed to win 7 or 8 rounds, 9 rounds definitively to get that 115, 113 scorecard, right? Sheeraz, he just wasn't ready. And, I am not going to hate on him for stepping up to a championship fight, finding out what he was made of, and finding out, I need to put a little more work in before I give this another try. And for Pete's sake, the middleweight division is just, not in the best shape right now. So it was one of the few decent fights that could be made right now. And let's get the rest of the title holders busy and get on with it.
Absolutely. And by extension, can we please get a unification fight between Adamaz and Janabek this year? I mean, that's the only viable, halfway entertaining fight right now at 160 pounds. They keep talking around each other, uh, saying one person's scared or one person don't want to fight, the other person don't want to fight. Miss me with that. Just like I want to see Tank and Shakur. I want to see Jana Beck and Adamas fight this year. They have history. They sparred each other multiple times, right? Um, they clearly want to fight each other. Apparently, the powers that be, make it happen, please. Now, if you didn't watch the card from the very beginning, the main card, uh, you missed what turned out to be Daniel, just a sensational fight between um, jo- uh, Joshua Bawatsi and former super middleweight champion Callum Smith. Right? I think Bawatsi was an interim champion at 175. It doesn't matter. Uh, the the main thing was the action itself. Dare I say that Callum Smith Daniel put on the best performance of his career? There were some questions about Bawatsi and his toughness and whether he can step up to the moment. He showed that he did, but in the end, just Smith, they both hurt each other, right? But in the end, Callum Smith just edged it out. He was just had a little bit too much for Bawatsi. But if we didn't have Bivol, Beterbiev, too, this would have been the fight of the night and the leading contender for fight of the year. Fantastic battle.
Yeah, I missed it live, but luckily I caught it a bit on replay. And these two have been circling each other in British circles for a bit because they were close to the weight to each other. And of the Smith family, and I've said this for years, you guys can check me on it. When it came to the Smith family, I always said that Callum had the most potential. Liam was the most experienced. Paul was the toughest one. But Callum had the most potential. And even after losing to Canelo the way he did, he showed out. Like he moved up and he started rebuilding himself. And this was one of the most beautiful performances as far as gutting out a win against somebody at 175 who we thought for a long time that he was going to be one of the people that's going to be next in line. That when Beterbiev would leave, like, okay, no, Boatsi's ready to step up. He'll be the one to face Bivol. He'll be the one to face Benavides. But he, unfortunately, Boatsi hit a bit of that ball, and Callum now seems poised to take it out. Now, I would love a rematch. Because you're right, like, Callum won this by the skin of his teeth. I would love to see a rematch and just to see if Boatsi can make the right adjustments to have an edge in the fight in this case, especially against somebody like Callum, who now has the confidence saying, like, I beat somebody that is at least world championship caliber at 175. If not, Gail mentioned it before. A fight of Benavides would be a beautiful thing. They're similar size. They tend to fight in a similar way. And both of these guys are going to give 110% in the ring. So the future's bright for Callum either way.
If Smith and Bawasi fight, I wouldn't be mad at that, but I'd rather see it in England. They're two British fighters. They both are somewhat popular there. Um, that kind of scrap between those two men in particular, it needs to be in England. I'm also not mad at a fight with Benavidez, right? To your point, styles matter, and the way that both guys fight, that would be an excellent contest. Couldn't help but be an exciting contest. Both like to come forward. I think Smith can fight a little bit more on the back foot, but Benavidez matches him in height, matches him in pretty much in size. Smith may be a little bit taller, but yeah, that would be an excellent fight as well. Um, because it looks like Smith is not going to get a fight with Beterbiev or Bivol anytime soon, and neither is Benavidez. So that yeah, that makes a lot of sense as well. Let's move on. No real news here again because we had so many fights to recap. So let's get right into the previews of a card that's going to take place in Brooklyn on March 1st. And main event, of course, is the return of Tank Davis fighting junior lightweight champion Lamont Roach. But on the undercard, Gail, you have where do I want to go? Let's go with Rayo Valenzuela, who scored what many consider the upset over Pitbull Cruz last fall, right? Returning to fight Gary Antoine Russell, who I think lost his last fight. Uh, he looked like he was the next coming. He looked like he could be the best of the Russell brothers in terms of potential, in terms of explosive factor, really in punching power. But he got exposed a bit in his last fight. This one I can't call. Is Valenzuela as good as he looked against Cruz? Is Russell overall the more talented fighter? Interesting matchup here. I can't predict the winner in truth.
I do think Valenzuela is as good as he looks. I've seen him in multiple fights. I've seen him at workouts. I've talked to him. He has the benefit of having trained with Team Benavides for a long time, and that is some serious damn schooling in the gym and mindset and work ethic. I will say that Gary Antoine has also had the benefit of being around a very high level camp with his late father and his brothers. And I found it very interesting the transition that Gary Jr. has made from being active in the ring to training his brothers. And I think he's going to be perhaps someone a lot like Mark Breland, who was a very fine fighter in his day, but has turned out to be an even better trainer. And I think Gary Jr. is going to fit that mold as well, whether or not he ever returns. Nevertheless, I think that it will come down in a very close fight in a similar way to what we've seen between Beterbiev and Bivol. Who wants it more? Who is willing to step on the gas when necessary? You know, Valenzuela does know what it's like to lose, and he didn't like it. And we saw how he came back from that. He's feeling confident, he's feeling fueled. And there's that cliche that we honor in boxing about the champion being just that 10% better because they hold the belt. And I think in a tight match, Valenzuela will eke it out. He might score a knockdown on the way, and that will be the difference. But it is very close to a 50-50 fight, and I think it has the potential to be the best fight on the card.
Sorry, I was on mute. Also on the card, um, another intriguing fight, interesting fight as far as I'm concerned. Let me cut this down. Um, Albert Puello defending, I think it's the BC belt against Sandor Martin. Many people remember Martin for his fight with Teofimo. Uh, turns out a couple of years back now. I felt that Sandor Martin won that bout against Teofimo. For me, how is Puello going to deal, Daniel, with the jab, with the movement and the boxing skills of Martin? And I think Martin is a little bit of a sneaky good puncher as well. Hits harder than a lot of people give him credit for. I got Martin doing just enough to move around a bit and outbox Puello. Your thoughts?
My thing with Martin, luckily, is that for all the move that he does have he's developed, I think, over the past few years, a bit of a power jab. And that's helped him with the movement, with setting up his punches and maintaining enough distance for him to win using defense. And that's been a formula for success. You mentioned that, like, most people believe he beat Teofimo. Rightfully so. And I think this is going to be a similar thing in this case, because Martin has been at the cusp, like, of breaking out into at least a world championship contender. He knows this is one of his opportunities to get it done against somebody that has a belt. And he knows that from the Teofimo fight and others that he's going to have sometimes a scorecard against him against a champion. He's going to be at least 2 rounds down from the start of the fight. I think he'll pull it out. I think he'll establish a bit of power early. He'll establish movement early, and he'll pace the fight in a way where Puello won't be able to adjust enough to shift the tide.
Main event, of course, is the return of Tank Davis, who has a belt at 135, fighting Lamont Roach, who has a belt at 130. I don't want to be too dismissive of Roach because he's a solid fighter, right? But there are levels to this. I don't know if how he's going to be able to handle the power of Tank. Uh, as much as I'm critical of Gervonta in terms of his level of competition, he is a he has more skills than people give him credit for. Is he on the level of Shakur or Loma? No, but uh, he's not a bad fundamental fighter. Not a bad fundamental fighter at all. Um, he finds a way to get to these guys to hurt them and stop them. That's not just by chance. There's something in there that he's doing right in terms of ring IQ and setting guys up and whatnot. And I think that will happen again in this fight. Yeah, Roach, he may be competitive in the early rounds and maybe in the first half of the fight. But I just think over time, Tank Davis will figure things out. He'll come up with the requisite punches to hurt him and ultimately stop him, if not win by pretty wide points margin on the scorecard if it goes to decision.
This is a fight where Lamont Roach Jr. has absolutely nothing to lose. He's over broke. And he seems to have that attitude in the interviews I've seen. He's coming up to 135. He says he's very comfortable there. He says that he is not coming in with the B-side mentality and that he finds that's the mistake a lot of Tank's opponents make is they're already, sort of scared by him. And he said, that's not going to happen. And I'm putting in the work. I'm going to bring it to him. And it's not going to be something he's used to. Now, a lot of guys have said that about Gervonta Davis. And a lot of those guys do really well in the first half of the fight. Tank is a notoriously slow starter. So it's possible that Roach Jr. is going to look good early, bag a few rounds early, which is the smart thing for him to do, is to really try to win the rounds in the first half, 2/3 of that fight, because the danger zone comes a little bit later once Tank has settled in. He's very patient. And then he just decides to unload when he knows where he's going. He's so efficient that way. He doesn't waste a lot of time early, which is why he loses those early rounds, because he really wants to see what's in front of him and decide how to approach it when he's in there. And he knows he's got the full toolkit, the power, the experience. I think he'll take out Roach in the later rounds. It will be something of a moral victory if Roach can go all the way with Tank, and that's possible. I think that's really the only intriguing decision of this fight. I hope it is entertaining. We need good fight cards on American soil. We need entertaining fight cards that fans will attend, buy the tickets, buy the pay-per-views, even though they're not at Saudi prices. I get that, everybody. I really do. But boxing needs to be kept healthy within the confines of the United States borders on American shores. And this is one of those opportunities to hopefully see that happen. There are some decent fights on the undercard. Maybe they aren't huge names, but I hope we'll get some entertaining fights that fans will give it a chance, and stay loyal to the soil. Come on, everybody.
If you're a true boxing fan, yeah, that's what you should do. And I think we're going to end things on that note. I want to thank everybody who joined us via the live chat. MG, let me post his comments right here before we head off. I want to enjoy boxing on Saturday, but after paying $25
Yeah.
for a very good.
You know what? And MG, despite what I just said, I absolutely understand this. I hear you. Budgets are starting to grow tighter, as we're seeing. And if it's a chance of here's what I've got to spend, and I could spend $26, 25 and change on the card we saw Saturday versus the 89 for the pay-per-view this Saturday, I get it. And if I had to make the choice, I'd make that same choice. It would be nice if 2 or 3 fans could get together, split the cost, bring it down so that you're each paying 25, $30, because this is why we're losing opportunities to see these fights here in the United States. And it really does matter. But if you can't buy this pay-per-view, folks, go to your local club fights. Go watch these other cards, talk them up. Boxing is starting to wither away on our shores. Boxing will never die as a sport. Yes, it's more of a niche sport than it used to be, but it is wildly healthy in the UK, it's in Japan and in Asia, in Mexico. It's still roaring away as a popular sport in all of those venues. And of course, the big fights are being siphoned off to Saudi Arabia when guys get to the top level. But we won't develop those talents unless the prospects get their chance on the club fights, on the regional cards, and look at the Saudi cards. Where are the women? They're almost nowhere to be seen. So we got to keep boxing healthy here.
100%. Um, Again, thank MG, thank Felipe for their comments in the chat. I'm going to go around the panel first. While I didn't start the show with ladies first on this particular episode, I usually do, and I usually end the show with ladies first. So, Gail from nyfights.com, for those who want to talk to Sweet Science, let the folks know where they can find you.
I do not mind that at all. Sometimes the situation and circumstances call for it, so much appreciated. A quick reminder as we're signing off that there is a card from Montreal on Thursday night that is available via ESPN Plus through Eye of the Tiger, which will be a good thing to see. And keep an eye out for those smaller cards on the schedule. You could find me at
And go ahead.
yeah, yeah. Give me some Eye of the
No, I was going to
Tiger.
say, I believe Superel Matias is fighting as
Yes,
well
on Friday night.
this weekend.
Correct. I believe Friday night, might be Saturday. Um, Yeah, he is back in action on a card that is, I will check that date. It is on March 1st, via fading Gabe Valenzuela in at home in Puerto Rico. This is kind of a comeback fight for Matias, and it is on DAZN. It's um, a so I believe it's a Salida Promotions and Fresh Promotions, so you may see some Salida fighters underneath. And here's a trivia note. It will be Al Bernstein's 45th anniversary as a broadcaster in boxing, starting on uh, that fight card March 1st. Me, I'm at nyfights.com.
I go to you, Daniel, from For Boxing News and the Inscriber. For those who want to talk all things boxing, for those who want to talk all things pro wrestling, the NBA, especially as it pertains to the Miami Heat, let the folks know where they can hit you up.
It's the same handle everywhere. Still on Twitter for the time being. It's Blue Sky, Macedon, Spill, Rocks99, RAWKUZ99. Catch me on there. And I thoroughly and emphatically second Gail's push. If you can't afford the pay-per-view fights, go watch your regional cards. Go watch the amateurs, the kids, or the Golden Gloves. Go watch the club fights, because that's where the stars of tomorrow are made. And if you support them, you'll get other promoters that'll come in and will help them stick around, because you cannot let it be a situation where the only option for fighters, especially when you want to see the big cards, when fights the best of the best, where the only way to go is to a theocracy.
Absolutely. And then for those who want to talk boxing, music, fitness, you know what it is with me. On Twitter, because I refuse to call it X, you can do so. Check me out there, Brother JR76 on IG, and on IG is Brother JR SC, on Blue Sky is Brother JR76. On the next episode, we would have a recap of the card in Brooklyn, the return of Tank Davis. Is again, he's putting his WBA 135-pound belt on the line against Lamont Roach, who is a world champion at 130 pounds. On the undercard, Jose Rayo Valenzuela making the first defense of the WBA belt at 140 against Gary Antuanne Russell. Alberto Puello fighting Sandor Martin for Puello's WBC belt at 140. And yeah, the return of Super Matias. He is fighting March 1st in Puerto Rico on the zone against Gabriel Valenzuela. So we will talk about those bouts, and we will preview unification again with the ladies welterweight division, as IBF welterweight champion Natasha Jonas is fighting countryman Lauren Price, who has the WBC belt. Uh, excuse me, Jonas is IBF and WBC champion. Jonas is WBA champion. My apologies. They're going to fight in a unification showdown in London on March 7th. On the undercard, you have Caroline Dubois, who is WBC champion at 135. She's fighting Bo Mi Sheen. Um, so she's fighting on that undercard there. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think. Is anything else viable after that? I think that's going to be it. So that's the main card. If there's anything other boxing happening in that interim, we will sure talk about it. So again, mainly a recap and preview episode this week. Just too many cards and to not really get into real news. So this has been episode 464 of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. Again, I want to thank everybody who joins in the live YouTube chat. For Gail of NYFights.com, from Daniel for Boxing News and the Inscriber. I am your host, Michael. We will see you guys next time. Everyone have a good evening, good night, and Rest in power, Roberta Flack. Pound for Pound Box Report. Pound for Pound Box Report, episode 464. See y'all next time.